Hello and welcome everyone to this Red Gaming Tech review of Streets of Rage 4, which was published and developed by Dotemu and is currently available on Steam for the grand price of £22.49. I, like many other people who grew up in the late 80s and early 90s, have very fond memories of the original Streets of Rage games. The SEGA Mega Drive, or Genesis as it's called in America, was the first console I had as a kid, and I have so many fond memories of all the games I spent way too much time on. Obviously, Streets of Rage was one of them, alongside games like Shinobi and Golden Axe, to name just a few. So safe to say that when I went into Streets of Rage 4, my expectations were quite high. But let's get into the nitty gritty. Let's begin with where I usually like to start, the menus. The first thing you will notice is that there is a nice platter of game modes to choose from, most of which are unlocked upon completing the game. Surprisingly, there's even local co-op as well as online features. But the main thing I want to touch on here is the insane amount of customizability for the game itself. In the HUD menu, you can customize everything from your health bar, the enemy health bar and combo counter, to what food items you see as pickups throughout the game. The original game had apples and turkeys as their items, but you can customize them to be a croissant and a ramen bowl if you want. The customization also extends into the graphics menu, with a surprising amount of tweaking being available for a 2D game. The amount of choice available to players here is one of the first things that starts to tell you just how much work Dotemu put into this game. Let's move on to the thing you're all here for though, the main game. The graphic style is bright, colourful, and a more cartoony style than the original pixel graphics, but is still obviously Streets of Rage. It helps that you have some of the classic characters to choose from on the selection screen. Personally, I'm a Blaze person, but the environments give the feel of the original games despite the stark difference in graphic style. But there's lots of detail going on in the background as you move from dirty back alley streets to other areas, and it all just feels right as a huge Streets of Rage fan. This extends to the enemies as well. While there are of course a lot of new enemies added into this game, we also see a lot of familiar faces, including the infamous dominatrix ladies. But the real question I'm sure your mind is on is, what about the gameplay? The good news is that it's fluid, meaty, and tons of fun. Now obviously the game has little touches of modernization throughout the game, like the menu options, and that extends to the gameplay too. While you still have the classic feel of Streets of Rage by moving between horizontal planes on the screen, and unfortunately that same frustrating feeling of being slightly too above the enemy and punch in the air, but you have way more flexibility with the combos themselves. The combos do bring in some small elements of fighting game mechanics with special moves that you can activate with simple to execute combos, such as like back X, just for example. Or you can do your special move in the air, which I'll get to in a moment. So your actual special is bound to Y. Now back in the day, this would have summoned a police car from the ether who would fire a rocket onto your screen and probably onto a boss of some description. That has been changed, as the special attack is now just a special move that is obviously different depending on which character you're playing. For example, Blaze has kind of like a Hadouken thing, or she can do like a backflip, and Alex has like a fire punch and other things like that. And you also have an ultra move, which you have a certain amount of uses, which is noted by the star next to your health bar. Now this of course does vary by character, and unfortunately his usefulness also varies by character as well, but it's pretty useful for getting yourself out of a jam if there's a lot of enemies on the screen, or of course just doing a lot of damage to the boss in question. Now the special move, the one bound to Y, not the one that you only have limited amount of uses, is a powerful attack that can really help with some of the insane amount of mobs the game throws at you. However, using this Y ability does deplete some of your health, but similar to the rally mechanic we saw in Bloodborne, if you hit an enemy with normal attacks, you can regain that lost health back. A nice mechanic to basically mean that using your special ability isn't too punishing, and also encourages you to be quite aggressive after using your ability and come up with a follow-up attack, even if it's not on that enemy, because with some of the specials the enemy does tend to get flown away from you. Overall though, the combat is great. It feels smooth and just great fun to play, but also challenging. Even on normal mode, the game is not shy about just throwing insane amount of mobs at you. This is a game that you definitely have to pay attention to. Just randomly spamming isn't going to get you very far. Now obviously, one thing I haven't mentioned so far is the random weapon drops throughout the level, which can also give you an upper hand if they aren't grabbed by the enemy first. Now we do see more variety in terms of the weapons available in comparison to the original game. Now obviously we did see a fair amount of variety in the original. We saw things like metal pipes, glass bottles, knives, that sort of thing, but there is way more weapon variety in this one, and obviously they each have their ups and downs, but they're pretty useful. I tend to pick up weapons whenever there's one available, even if it's just to throw. It always helps just to give you that little bit of breathing space. Unfortunately though, in the combat also rests my main issue with the game. While the game has definitely been given a modern breath of fresh air to help bring this classic franchise into the current year, I do feel like it could have done with a touch more modernisation. With the classic feel of the gameplay comes familiar issues, like the one I mentioned where you can just be just slightly above an enemy and end up missing your punch or swing of the pipe. When this happens multiple times per game, it can be quite frustrating. What is also frustrating though is the lack of mobility. I feel like this game really needed a roll or some kind of dodge mechanic. It does feel like there is a lack of maneuverability in this, and it does feel like there is little you can do when you suddenly get ganged up on by the boss and his goons. Of course, you can move between planes, jump, or simply try and move out of the way, but I just feel those things aren't enough. A roll, or backstep, or some kind of dodge would have helped this game immensely. By no means am I saying that I don't like the game. In fact, I think it's fantastic, and a worthy entry into a childhood franchise for many. But this one complaint does knock off several points, as it adds quite a lot of frustration into the moment-to-moment gameplay. That and the game's tendency to absolutely swarm you with enemies can lead to a feeling of being unable to do anything to prevent your untimely doom. Overall though, the game is great. There is an insane amount of replay value with the different characters and modes, plus the game is fairly light on the wallet at just over £20, sorry, should I say. Personally, I would say this game is a must for any old school Streets of Rage fan. I would say dive in, immerse yourself into the grimy world of Streets of Rage 4 and have some turkey-fueled backstreet brawls from the comfort of your sofa. For those of you who perhaps were too young, or are too young, sorry, should I say, to have experienced the originals when they came out, thanks for making me feel ancient. But in all seriousness, you might wonder, would I recommend this game to fans of just this sort of side-scrolling brawler, you know, fans of games like Shank 2, and Mother Russia Bleeds? I would say yes, absolutely. I loved Shank 2 and Mother Russia Bleeds, which is why I mentioned all of them. In fact, I did do a review, or a first impression should I say, of Mother Russia Bleeds back in the day. I'll link it below if you want to go check it out. It's a great game actually. But yes, if you enjoyed those sorts of games, I would definitely recommend Streets of Rage 4. It is great fun. You know, the combat is meaty, it feels satisfying to play, and there's that feeling of like finally getting through a difficult boss or difficult area, and you just get that familiar feeling of like, yes, I did it. And it just feels very satisfying and fun to play. The niggles that I have brought up throughout this video are small ones, to be honest with you. They are very small ones. They add small amounts of frustration that are a shame they're there, because I feel like the issues I have with this game are easily fixable, to be honest. But even with those issues in mind, this is still a great game, great experience, and a great time. Now I will say I did play this game both on my own and on couch co-op with my partner, and I will say it's fun either way. The game definitely does know when you have another player. The amount of enemies on screen when there's two people is pretty nuts, but it's not shy about holding back when there's only a single player on the screen as well. I haven't, at the time of recording, unlocked any of the other modes, unfortunately, but I did also give the battle mode a try, which is basically a PvP mode where you can fight against the person next to you on the sofa. I would say this mode is pretty throwaway. It's fun just to kind of go against a friend or whoever that you might be playing with, But the main meat of the game, the main reason you guys are playing is going to be for the single player, either by yourself or with a friend, or the online components. Personally, I didn't play online just because I'm really not interested in multiplayer, generally speaking, plus I had someone next to me who I could play with. And to be honest, it's brought up nice memories just to sit and play Streets of Rage like on the sofa with a friend. Like, it just really took me right back to my childhood, to be honest. So, long story short, I would recommend Streets of Rage. I'm not going to score it because I don't do scores, but I would say that keep in mind the criticisms I have, but overall it is a great game, and it is very, very, very clear that the developers put in a ton of work and love into this title. Well, I think that wraps this up. Thank you so much for watching. As always, do remember to like and subscribe, it does help out a great deal, and I'll see you next time.